on, everybody? This is Jason Ostrowski, and welcome to another episode of the Everything Real Estate Podcast. My guest on the podcast today is David Childers, president of Keeping Current Matters, a company that has made it their mission to give real estate professionals the data, clarity, and confidence they need to communicate with the people they serve. If you've ever watched one of David's presentations, you've seen him on social media, or you listen to him on a podcast, you know that he has a real talent for cutting through the noise and making complex real estate trends feel simple, digestible, and actionable. And today, we're talking about what the numbers are actually telling us about the real estate market, dispelling some of the outdated assumptions that buyers and sellers are still carrying into conversations, and where the real opportunities lie as we head toward 2026. The real estate landscape is shifting, but the agents who learn how to interpret the data and deliver truth with confidence are the ones who are going to win. This episode is packed with perspective and practical takeaways, so let's dive deep into the data with my special guest, David Childers. My guest today works tirelessly to make sense out of the constant flow of real estate data that we're bombarded with at all times, and his insights and ideas always make us sound just a little bit smarter when it comes to talking to our clients or posting a real estate video or sharing one of KCM's standout infographics. He is the president of Keeping Current Matters. His name is David Childers. How are you, David?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for that kind introduction. Grateful to be on with you today and share a little bit about what we're seeing in this market, but thank you for that.
Well, I know we've been trying to make this happen for a little while, so I thank you for joining us. And I'm excited to break down some of this real estate data with you today. I feel like 2025 has been an odd year, is how I would describe it.
Sure.
Not just because of the numbers, but because of the uncertainty of it all, or the feel of 2025 of being uncertain. I felt like I never knew what I was going to get this year. 2025 felt in many ways to me like real estate potluck. And so to start us off, do you agree with the assessment that 2025 was all over the map, or did you see something in the data that made it entirely predictable?
No, I don't think, I think generally we started off this year thinking it was going to be better than it was. Okay, that was the sort of tone of a lot of people, and even us, like things we were seeing. And then everything that I think is happening in the market right now, for the most part, and I'm not taking away people's hard work and people in the business, but it's driven by mortgage rates. That's what sort of sets the temperature. Well, mortgage rates are all based right now on incoming data. And, nobody has a crystal ball. I can't tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. Right? Somebody comes out politically and says something, or the Fed says something, and it has an impact on rates. That changes the trajectory of this market. So I think it has been one of those markets that people thought it would be better than it was. I'll tell you a funny story. My best friend from high school, he and I were on the phone yesterday, as a matter of fact. And he doesn't live in the Northeast. He lives I grew up in a little town outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and he flips houses. And he was like, the story of this market, he told me this yesterday. He was like, 1 week I feel like, oh my gosh, we got a little bit of wind. We're going to make it. We got people, we got activity. And the next week it's like gone, and that's been the story of this market by and large. But I don't think there was anybody that was like, this is how it's going to go. And I'm exactly right. And we can talk about that too, but I do think it's been a little bit of a different year in that respect.
It's been interesting from the standpoint of, one home in a neighborhood goes on the market, sells immediately, has 5 offers. Another house comes on down the street in similar condition, languishes on the market for a couple months.
Yeah.
And it just never made sense to me in 2025 why that was happening. I know a large driver of that was mortgage rates, obviously.
Sure.
But, seeing certain segments of the market sell really well, other segments of the market where we are kind of lag a little bit. That condo market has been kind of languishing where we are a little bit. So when you look at the Northeast specifically, what dynamics are emerging that may differ from other regions across the country?
Let me go back to what you said, and I'm going to answer that question. I think the other thing that has become very apparent this year with mortgage rates, and I don't want to put everything in the mortgage rate basket and say we're sort of, slave to that. The other piece of that is pricing. The price of the home has become critically important this year. A couple of things that are just facts. The number of price reductions, people having to go, well, we thought we were going to sell it for this, reduce the price, has, kind of climbed at a pace that it hasn't been at. Matter of fact, last month, 20% of the homes on the market in the month of October had a price reduction in this country. That's higher than it's been, certainly for the last 5 years and before that. And so I think mortgage rates and I think price, and we were talking earlier about the chance, and I'm honored with the opportunity to get to share the KCM message at a lot of events, but I'll say a sort of a line like this, and it is, in front of a group of agents, and I've never had somebody go, well, you're wrong about that. If a home is priced right in a market, it's selling quickly. So usually if something's not moving, my sort of, survey of the market, and you're in it, I'm not in it every day, let's be very clear, is that a lot of those things do come down to price. They look similar, but there's something there that's causing the buyer to go, well, we think something different. Sellers are like, no, we want top dollar. And buyers are like, we feel like, the market's shifting. And so that dynamic is there in that. So I wanted to say that about what you said. Now I've said that and I forgot the question you asked me.
I was actually talking about
the difference in the Northeast market.
The Northeast, and if you see different dynamics here emerging from other. For sure. Let me give you that. Now, and I'm not gonna show a lot of graphics. Obviously, people listening can't see those, but I will send you some of these. And if you want to put them in the show notes, or people can reach out to you and get them. Absolutely. There are dramatic differences in the Northeast than most of the rest of the country. And it has to do with inventory. So let me just give you a sort of a word picture, if you will. We went through the COVID years and we depleted inventory, right? Mortgage rates fell. Everybody jumped in. They said, we want a house. We want to do this. We'll take two, and we depleted inventory in this country. And now if you fast forward to today, inventory is coming back. Here's an interesting statistic. October, this last month, we're recording this in November, was the 6th month in a row in this country where there were over 1 million active listings for sale. Now, why that's so important, listen to me, because that has not happened since the fall of 2019. So you have this 5-year sort of drought and then inventory coming back. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If you start to measure inventory, and let's take the Northeast, I'm going to reference a couple numbers that I'll send you so people have the information. Over the last year in the Northeast region of the country, inventory is up 8.9%, call it 9%, almost 10. Year over year, there are almost 10% more homes on the market than last year. But listen to this. Since the pandemic, inventory is still down 48%. Wow.
So if there were 100 houses on the market in 2019, today that number is 50. To contrast that to the South, where I told you I grew up in a little town in Georgia, the South right now, year over year, is up 17%, but over pre-pandemic, up 5%. So they've recovered. The West has recovered. The Northeast and the Midwest are still down. So inventory drives a lot, price drives a lot, mortgage rates drive a lot, but you have these dynamics that if you're in the market right now, and I mean in the market, the professional agent, this stuff is not, and I don't mean to sound crass. I look at this every day and I have that advantage. Obviously if you're an agent, you got a lot of other things to do than do what I do, but some of it's not super, super hard, right? Inventory's down, mortgage rates are higher than where we want them to be. price reductions are active in the market. And so anytime you sit down with a seller or a buyer, you want to educate them on that. I was at an event, somebody came up to me and they said, I try to sit down with everybody and say, has somebody taken 5 minutes to educate you on what's happening in this market? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. Right. And then you get disconnected sort of thinking from a buyer or a seller where we can kind of close that gap for them.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about that next. But one of the stats that I kind of gleaned from you recently that I found super interesting was that homes that are taken off the market are up 57% compared to this time last year.
Correct.
Do you think that speaks to us not educating our sellers enough when it comes? Maybe they have undue expectations of what the market is going to look like right now, right?
1,000%. Yeah. I think so that statistic is the number of homes that have been taken off the market. The seller decides we're not going to sell it anymore, is up 57% year over year. Okay. So that's a huge number. I did a video on this, which you can go to the KCM Instagram page. It's probably one of the most viewed videos. And there are a lot of people that watch KCM. But I can start to tell, this is something that people are interested in. Mm-hmm. So why does that happen? I'll give you my opinion of it. And this is where I think every agent, I would encourage you to sort of model this after what I'm about to say, is what you want to do in the market is you want to have a relevant market opinion based upon a fact. So what I'm constantly trying to do is to say, I see a fact right here. I'm going to give you my opinion about why I believe that is true. You don't have to agree with my opinion, but I'm using a fact to say this is what I believe. The reason I joke around about it is because a lot of people have opinions about real estate that are not rooted in facts, right? So my opinion of that is there's 2 predominant reasons. One, the seller does not understand the pricing dynamics in the market. Right? And what's happening with price. Probably haven't been educated, or there wasn't an agent that sat down and said the home's overpriced. And that's a hard conversation. I'm not trying to say it's not a hard conversation. So I think that's one. The other fact that we know is the median days on market is rising. So likely overpriced, taking longer to sell it, and the seller goes, we're good. Right? We don't want to do it. So they pull the home off the market. That's why you're seeing a rise in those things. And so if I'm sitting down with a seller, I want to give them that fact. I want to tell them this is why I think it is. And hey, if you're serious about selling, let's not end up in that category.
Yeah, and educating our people obviously is a huge part of what we do every day. And we touched upon maybe the disconnect. I always say that it seems like our clients are kind of lagging indicators. They kind of catch up to where we are over time, but we have to make sure to bring them with us when we see something in the market. We have to obviously educate them on what's happening to bring them up to speed. So I want to know, for buyers and sellers out there that are looking to be in the market, what outdated assumptions are still shaping their expectations right now heading into 2026?
Well, I would start with sellers. I think sellers probably have the outdated assumptions. I think buyers are like, we see the market turning and we're ready, right? That's probably the truth. I do think there's a buyer element that I'll come back to, but sellers generally think we're going to sell the house in an hour for 50 times what we paid for it and go live on a boat in the Caribbean or whatever we're going to do, right? And so I think they have to be educated. This market is shifting. I think buyers generally don't understand. I mean, they're already like, we're here for it, right? They're like, hey, we see price coming down and can't happen sooner and can't happen fast enough, right? What most buyers don't understand is that in this country, we are undersupplied in housing units. Most would say somewhere between 2 and 3 million units, meaning there aren't enough homes for the number of people that would want to buy. Now, affordability is a big issue, and I can get into that. But buyers don't understand that dynamic will keep upward pressure on prices. That's why there are two reasons why this market won't crash and price will not fall. One is undersupply. The other is you have a very, very well, sort of balance sheet of the homeowner. The number of mortgages right now that are below 5% is over 80%. I don't have the exact number. I mean, it's shocking, right? These people, most of the people in this country that have a great mortgage rate couldn't go out and rent an apartment for what their mortgage is. So it's like they're going to do everything in their power to not let that, slip away. Kind of like back in '08, the term strategic default was coined when people just walked and they're like, we don't care. The house is worth less than what we owe on it. And the numbers are dramatically different, right now.
Well, you talked about interest rates, and I've heard you in conversations with others talking about maybe, we dip down into the fives and everything changes in terms of mortgage rates. What leading indicators are you watching that give you confidence or concern about the market's direction in 2026?
Well, I think let me be clear on what I believe about this mortgage market going forward. It's all based upon incoming data. So wait till some political figure or the Fed says something. And the reason rates kind of shot up in the last few weeks is because the Fed chair came out and said, don't count on another rate cut of the Fed funds rate. But I think we will, in the next year, hover in the low sixes. I mean, I think a very narrow band, probably 6.25 to 6. And I think we'll dip our toe in the fives here or there. I don't think we'll stay there, but I think it'll be like a moment in time. Boom, we're there. Get in, get out. Kind of market. What do I see that causes me to believe that? I was in New York 2 weeks ago at a housing conference where a lot of Wall Street sort of execs were there talking. It was very interesting. Bill Pulte, who is the FHA chairman, spoke, and there are a lot of opinions on him, but I think this administration is pressuring the Fed to move quicker. And you have to understand that argument. The argument is that we're not in an inflationary economy right now where inflation's spiking. It's a little bit higher than the 2% target they want, but the labor market has been in decline. You have to get that. If I were to graph for you, and we have a KCM graphic for it, the number of jobs that have been created in this country over the last 18 months, it's like this going down. I mean, it's a very clear trend line. So the Fed has two responsibilities: maximum employment and price stability. Price stability is the inflation thing, and that's largely under control. They don't want to set up, it's almost like, I don't know if you've ever been camping and you kind of put the fire out and you throw something on it, it flames back up. They don't want the flames to sort of go back up again, but the challenge is in the labor market. And so I think there's going to be increasing pressure on the Fed to make a move there. Now, the Fed doesn't control mortgage rates, but what that will do is that will then sort of push this economy forward. That's the lever they have. So I see that sign very clearly happening. The other thing that the Fed came out and said, and not that we all need to become experts in the mortgage market, is back in 2020, they drove rates lower by buying mortgage-backed securities. Well, what they did when rates started to go up, they, one, stopped buying, but two, they started selling off their balance sheet. Fed Chairman Powell came out and said, we think it's time to stop selling. Okay, so that has an impact on mortgage rates. So I see the Fed action. I see this direction from the Fed going, we're going to stop selling mortgage mortgage bonds. And so as we see this sort of trajectory, and then I see forecasters that have a lot smarter than I am, that have all access to all this information, and they're forecasting for things to kind of creep lower. That's where I'd come up with my opinion. Now, again, you could agree 1,000%, you know, different than I do, or you could have an opinion different than I do, and I wouldn't blame you for it, but have a reason why you believe it. That's my message right now is figure out what you believe, use facts. Oh, by the way, that's important, right? And then say, hey, this is where I see this market. Now, here's the thing. This is it's what I don't talk about this a lot, but I believe it's what we stand for at KCM. What everybody wants in our business, by and large, whether you're like, no, I don't want that, is a crystal ball. You want to be able to tell everybody, this is what's going to happen. I don't have a crystal ball. Nobody has a crystal ball. But what you can be is a compass orienting people in the direction of the market. And I think people take advice from us because they if you're doing it the right way, they can trust it. They can go, okay, I believe this person knows what's happening in the Philly market or whatever market you're in, you know.
Well, I think your data is always, it is what it is, right? It's factual. We can work off of that. Like you said, you're not going to argue with the facts of the data. You may have an opinion on it, but KCM always gives the facts. And, you know, I want to touch upon something that you've talked about a lot recently, and that is, you know, inventory number one, but affordability number two. And it seems like that's the story of, you know, post-pandemic is affordability is such a big issue. The first-time home buyer average age rose to 40 years old now. I mean, that's insane to me. And I want to know what you think is going to be happening with supply levels next year. I know inventory is up. Do you foresee that still trending in the right direction? Are we in danger of price stagnation, or do you see appreciation? I know, you know, it's not going to be where we were in years prior, but do you still see homes in the Northeast especially appreciating despite those inventory challenges or because of those inventory challenges?
Yeah. So there's a lot there. Let's talk about prices for just a minute, and then maybe let's get into affordability. We look at the home price expectation survey, Keeping Current Matters, and they do a 5-year window. And then I told you I was in New York, and I saw Moody's 5-year window. So what the home price expectation survey does is they survey 100 economists and housing market experts, and they say, where do you think home prices are going in the next 5 years? I can tell you in their current, and we have all these, you know, graphics and things, the optimist, the middle of the road, and the pessimist, when aggregated in the home price expectation survey, all see positive price appreciation in the next 5 years. Moody's, that is Mark Zandi, who's the economist at Moody's, generally is sort of pessimistic in a lot of things, I would say. They see positive price appreciation. So let's back up. So that's just a fact. I don't see anybody other than some YouTubers maybe that are like, prices are going to crash and you're going to be able to go in and snap up a home. And oh, by the way, if you buy this course, you'll figure out how to do it, right? That's the game of that. Average price appreciation in this country has been 3.8% for the last 25 plus years. Now, we threw that off. The years of 21 and 22 throw those numbers off, but that's been average. What's being called for, and I'm going to use some rough numbers, is around 2 to 3% on average for the next 5 years. Below historical normal, but kind of in that range of historically very normal price appreciation. So that would be my outlook, is we'll see low, sort of anemic, maybe flat price appreciation, flatter price appreciation. But what we're used to, maybe sometimes, even though we don't want to admit it, is the last couple of years where we've seen 10, 15. We know that's out of control, but maybe we want 5%. Maybe we want a little bit more than that. But I think you'll see a very normal average appreciation. Why is that? Because, again, go back to the point I made. We don't have enough homes in this country for the number of people that want to buy them. So as you get a better mortgage rate environment, more people come into the market, that'll always keep upward pressure on prices. So I think that's going to be the way this market plays out.
I watched a video recently you talking about the market kind of recovering. and four key metrics to that recovery, right? One of those, surprisingly to me, you're talking about homes being more affordable, not
Sure.
super affordable, but better than it was. And
Sure.
part of that is the mortgage interest rates. Can you just touch upon, I guess, the narrative about I mean, I mentioned it before about affordability being the number one thing. How can we as agents talk to our clients, our buyers out there, about affordability becoming better?
Sure.
How do we approach that with our clients?
Sure. So a couple of the first fact is affordability right now, and this is going to bump around. I'll give you what determines it, is better than it's been in the past 2.5 years. And not where it needs to be. I'm not here to say like, oh, we're out of the woods and you get a home and you get a home and like everybody, that's not the case. But affordability is better. Now, let me back up and say something. We just went through the beginning of November, the midterm elections. I don't know, do you follow politics or?
I think everybody is forced to.
Let's get political.
Stage.
Let's get political here.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call myself somebody that's been a hardcore follower of politics, right? I spend a lot of time reading real estate related things, and I generally probably look at most politicians like, I'm not sure you have the answer. That's just me. Okay. But I caught myself, I don't know why I ended up in this situation, but I was watching that Tuesday night, all the, you can watch different news channels and they're like, this county and that county, and here's what's happening, and they won, and this person won and lost. But here's what every one of them had in common. We should pay attention to this. Every candidate, whether they lost or they won, and the ones that won shouted it from the rooftops in their acceptance speech, you can go back and watch every one of them, was home affordability is at the central point of what they're sort of focused on. I've never seen a political environment where the biggest issue was us in the real estate business. That is the biggest issue. And I think if you're listening to it, you're like, I kind of know that home affordability is a big deal and, it sucks and all that. But we should pay attention to that. It is the biggest issue Americans are facing. Now, why do I know that? The way that this was explained to me one time, and it's fascinating. I find it fascinating. I'll share it with you. The way that Washington, D.C. works, or politicians in general work, is they run to the burning building, okay? And they sort of kind of go, hey, we're going to come in, we're going to put out the fire that's threatening you, so vote for us. We're the ones that understand the issue and are going to take care of you. And every political party does it. Right? Neither conservative, liberal, Democrat, whatever you want to call it, conservative, Republican, anything, they both do it. They're like, vote for us. We have the solution. And the truth is, any political campaign, maybe they do and maybe they don't. Right? But they're certainly willing to step up and go vote for us. We have the solution. Right? Even take our business in the Wall Street's buying up all the homes. A lot of politicians are like, we're going to stop it. That's not even really a big issue across the country the way it's blown up to be. But people are like, yes, I'm voting for that. That's what I want. And so what they do is they key on to what is the biggest issue for Americans. We should pay attention to this. We should be the mouthpiece for affordability. Now you want to write this down. If you're listening, there are 3 things that affect affordability, because I can give you the breakdown of each one of them. You can, and it's not rocket science. I'm not that smart of a guy, okay, to be able to do all that. But you can give people your perspective. The 3 things are mortgage rates. That affects affordability. We know that, right? If you get a better mortgage rate, you get a higher mortgage rate. Price of the home, that affects affordability, right? And the issue of the last couple of years has not been mortgage rates. It's been the dramatic rise in prices, right? I think we all know that. And the third sort of, larger metric that affects affordability is wages. Okay, so from a fact-based perspective, what do I believe about affordability? Well, we know we started off this year around 7% in the average 30-year fixed, and we're in the lower 6s right now for the 30-year fixed mortgage rate. That's good, right? Coming down is good. What do we know about prices? We just talked about it. Prices aren't rising at the rate they were. At a slower rate of rise, that's good for affordability. And I can tell you from the Fed, the way they measure wages, people are making more money than they're making, or they were making as a sort of trend line in the last decade. Why do I say all this? You sit right now, I'll go back to what I said. Affordability is better right now than it's been in the last 2.5 years. My belief is it will slowly get better. It will slowly get better as we kind of go down the road. And so I think it's something we need to help people understand how they navigate this market. Given that, I can't remember what it was, talking to somebody on a podcast, and they asked me this question. They said, "What do you believe? What do you think is the most misunderstood element of affordability, by consumers right now?" And I thought, sometimes we were joking around about questions. I was like, I don't know the answer to that question. Like, you get hit with some of these questions, you're like, I don't know. And then it hit me, and I'm like, oh, I totally know the answer to this question, because it shows up in surveys all the time. The most misunderstood element of affordability is that it takes 20% down to buy a home. And I say that to you just as a reminder, because everybody probably listening is like, well, I know that, right? That's crazy. We know their loan products are zero down. There's other FHA. We know all of that. But just because we know it, don't assume those that we're working with know it. Don't assume just because you've said it before that people get it, right? It's staying on message, going, hey, one of the best things about affordability right now is we have products or access or whatever it is to help people buy homes, in starting those kinds of conversations, because it is the biggest issue that Americans are facing.
There was a lot in what you just said there. And, where do we begin with, some of these conversations? And this is why what you do is so important to us. And again, I'm not trying to sit here and say, David has all the answers for us. But at the same time, I think it's important to listen to what you're saying and how we approach these conversations with our clients. And I want to talk about buyers specifically heading into 2026. You just touched upon a lot of that, but it's also setting expectations with those clients, right? Let's talk about that 20% down, or what your options are. Here are the misconceptions that you may have about something. What realistic opportunities do you think we should be talking about with our buyers as we head into 2026, right? We're talking about maybe a modest increase of unit sales. We're talking about interest rates hovering around that 6% mark, maybe a little above, maybe a little bit below. What opportunities are they going to have next year? Number one, I want to touch upon something you had said about the difference between your monthly payment at, I think it was like 6.3%, comparatively speaking, to 5.99%. And I think that's one of those realistic, opportunities that they have to buy right now. They think the difference is so great, but it's really not. Can you touch upon that and maybe some other things that are opportunities for buyers next year?
Sure. I think first of all, I think for any buyer and any seller, I think the first thing I would do is I would really hone in, how am I going to educate people? What are the dynamics that are affecting their purchase? Rise in inventory affecting their purchase, mortgage rates. I want to educate people on a few key things and go, this is what's happening in the market. What questions do you have for me, right? So I can be that, sort of professional resource to someone. So what I said, and I'm not trying to put myself out there going, we're going to be in the fives or anything like that. I think we'll dip our toe in it. I think that, and somebody else could have a different opinion, and that's certainly welcome. But I think psychologically, for a lot of buyers, if that happens, their ears are going to perk up. They're going to go, you know what? We didn't do something over the last 24 or 36 months. Now's the time. So what do I think is the opportunity for the buyer? The opportunity is now. The opportunity is before you get there, right? There's stuff sitting on the market a little bit longer. right? Remember a couple of years ago when we were like, hey, I wish, things wouldn't sell as fast. We're there, I wish prices wouldn't go up as fast. We're there, right? So I think it's re-engaging with people. We had a KCM member that you may know her, Olivia Sawyer, who took a graphic of the reduction, how mortgage payments have fallen over the last 6 months. Texted out to 40 people, got 17 responses, I think set 8 appointments and closed the deal, right? So I'd be talking about that right now with my buyers. Affordability is better. The average mortgage payment is down. I would even calculate from May of this year to right now, the average price point in your market. And I'd say, hey, here in Philly, the average mortgage payment in the last 6 months has come down X dollars, right? Because it's significant. I can tell you in the US, it's a little over $300. Okay, so I want to talk about that for sure. Now, what you're referencing is if you take the average priced home, and it varies every day, so I can't hit the nail on the head. You calculate the mortgage payment, and then you calculate that mortgage payment at 5.99, right? Dipping our toe in the fives. The difference in payment is not that much. And depending on the day and the week and wherever we're at, 50, 60 bucks. Right. And so the question is, are you going to let 50 or 60 bucks stand in the way of taking the opportunity in this market?
I love framing it that way. I mean, it's just breaks it down to digestible information that sounds so reasonable, and it is reasonable because I think, like you said, the psychological factor comes into play. And, when we price things at $499.9, it's almost exactly like that, right?
Yeah.
That magic mark. I find myself doing it. I might refi on a property and I said, well, I'll refi once we go below 6, right? Right. So I find myself doing it. I know we often find our clients doing that.
Yeah, I think the opportunity is just to be a mouthpiece for all of those things that are happening. And be able to say, hey, here are the dynamics I see in the market. Not trying to convince something to do something they don't want to do, but showing people these are the numbers that go into it. And again, I tend to believe if we do dip our toe in the fives, you'll see a lot of people sort of perk up to that and want to jump in the market. Even getting ready for that and reaching out to people and just saying, hey, what do you think? There have been surveys that have been done to say, hey, what mortgage rate would it take for you to want to buy and all that. And we know that predominantly that gets people sort of excited. And so knowing your numbers, knowing the average price point in your market, being able to calculate those payments and say, this is what the average drop is. In buying a home, I think right now is something that I'm seeing people sort of gravitate to. If you're on social and you're posting things, you post something about house prices, people are interested, right? You post something about mortgage payments, people are interested. And I think being able to put that out is key.
Well, let's flip it over to sellers. You have a lot of sellers out there with those locked in interest rates, those locked in effects going on. We dip into the fives. What do you say? What do you say to those sellers that desperately want to move because they don't like their current home? Maybe they bought it on, in the pandemic market where they had to make a split second decision whether they were going to be buying that property. Now they're in it for a couple of years. They don't like it, but they have a 2.5% interest rate. They're looking to move on. What are you talking to them about in 2026? If they want to make that move, what are the reasons why they should?
Well, I think I think one of the things that we're seeing in the market, this was interesting. The number of people that have a mortgage over 6% is at a 10-year high. Now, a big reason for that, the last decade, the average rate was below 6%. So there's reasoning for that. But we're starting to see that shift, the lock-in effect. I do think there are a lot of people that have a great mortgage rate that are like, we're not going anywhere. Right. And that's going to happen. But I don't think it's going to be everyone. And so for sellers, the number one thing that you want to understand is what's the motivation to sell? If there's not a motivation to sell, I think it's tough in this market, right? The one that's like, hey, let's just test it out. Let's see if we can get it. That's going to be tough in this market. So I want to really have that conversation on the front end and say, hey, what's your motivation to sell? Let's look at pricing. Let me show you how many price reductions are happening in the market. Let me show you median days on market so that I can then create an expectation, right? If somebody's like, we're going to sell it, and most sellers right now, you could, vouch for this. Most places that I talk to agents are like, we didn't sell it the first week. They're like, what's wrong? What's going on? So I think that is going to be something that we need to do a better job of. It's just educating them. I will tell you, the number one day statistically, and certainly the information shows that, is that more homes listings expire is coming up. You know what day that is? I'll ask you, put you on the spot now.
Yeah.
December 31st.
Okay.
More contracts are written to the end of the year than any other day on the calendar. And I believe this December 31st, you're going to see more listings expire than you've seen in maybe the last 5 or 10 years. Because there's a disconnect with sellers right now.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that.
So we know that factually more listing agreements expire on December 31st than any other day of the year. Now, why is this important? It's important if there's one or two people listening right now. If you're an agent, you have a listing that's going to expire, or you're going to call a listing that's going to expire. You don't have it, right? So if you have one, having this conversation in advance is probably the biggest conversation you could ever have with a seller right now, because there's somebody coming in behind you that has nothing to lose.
And we remember those markets. I mean, if we go back to you talked about the Great Recession and, some of these listings, I remember, going after those expireds, going after those withdrawn listings, trying to be the second agent in to a lot of these properties. We haven't really been seeing much of that in the past 5 years at all. And now, you're making the case as to why we should be contacting some of these people to gain new business out of it. I want to actually, I know we're winding down here. If you could fast forward a year in advance from now, what do you think we're going to say about 2026? I know, again, it's a guessing game. I know things can change, but what is your best guess as to what we're going to reflect on and say, hey, this happened for the better in 2026, or maybe it wasn't so great for 2026? What do you think 2026 is going to be summed up as?
I think we will probably look at 2026 as the beginning of a turn in the market. If you look at 24 and 25 right now, from a unit standpoint, they're fairly even. About 4 million existing homes each year, 700,000 to 800,000 new homes. That number is projected to increase in 26 to between 5.2, 5.3 total sales. Okay, so I'm talking new homes and existing. So you have about a 10% increase. NAR is calling for a 14% increase. I think you will look back on this year as the beginning of a turn. I don't see anybody calling for us to blow the doors off and like, we're back and we're going to, see unbelievable numbers. So what is true right now is 2024 and 2025 will go down as some of the slowest transaction years in recorded history in real estate nationally. This is the, I don't know if you saw it, a lot of people saw it, the Redfin report that came out that said turnover rate was at the lowest point. Did you see that?
Mm-hmm.
So turnover rate is the number they calculate, the number of homes sold against population. There's tenure, which we know people are buying homes later and staying in their homes longer. And I think that number will go higher in tenure. But turnover rate is the number of transactions as compared to population growth. Now, what we can say is when we look at transactions, there have been many years where we've sold 4 million existing homes, but we haven't had the population in this country when that happened that we do today. So the rate of sales is at a pretty low point. I think you will see this as the pivot point. If you remember when you're in the business in '08 and kind of the years
Yes. I had just
past,
gotten in '07 and literally the market crashed.
welcome to real estate.
I
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Yeah.
It'll
Trial by
probably
fire.
be similar in the feeling, of 2012, right? That was sort of the pivot point. And it wasn't like everybody's like, all right, we're out of it. It's like, all right, like we might make it. We might make it, and I think it'll be similar to that.
I always end the podcast on kind of an offbeat question. And you and I were talking about your travel schedule prior to hopping on this podcast. And you have to be in front of a microphone, on camera, or talking in front of a crowd just as much, if not more, than anyone in this industry. So how do you deal with the grind of it all, number one? And number two, do you like to sit in complete silence and just stare at a wall when you actually have some time off?
I generally, like most of us, like talking to people. It's a huge, huge honor to be able to share the KCM message out, with, agents at events and places like that. And I always, try to remind everybody, even certainly our team here, we have an amazing team that does all of this work so that I can then do that. I used to joke around. I'm like, people are here to see KCM. They're not here to see David. If I don't show up with the slides, I got nothing. You know what I mean? So I count it as a tremendous honor. And yeah, there are times where I get to a point where I'm like, you know what? I'm good. I'm sure like all of us in the business, right? You talk all day and at night you're like, okay, I'm good, but I love it. I love what we do. I tell our team all the time to get a chance to do what you love with people that you love and make a difference in the world is a very, very special thing. And I don't take that for granted. I'm very, very thankful for it. So I'm grateful for it. It's in the end of the year. I was telling you that I am home for a couple of months and I'm really glad for that. And I'll tell you, when I'm home for any length of time, I start to get like, all right, what are we going to do this again? And so we'll pick back up in January and we'll be out at several events in January as the year kicks off. And I'm looking forward to that too. You know what I mean? So I can look at it all and go, okay, glad to be home. And I'll be glad to get back out when that time is here.
Well, it's a pleasure meeting you over Zoom. I hope that we can do this face to face at some point in time.
Yeah, for sure.
And obviously I know you very well from KCM. And before we get out of here, I just want to make sure to give Keeping Current Matters its due. Where can agents find you, number one, and where could they potentially sign up for your great data, your great information to share with their clients?
You can go to trykcm.com, trykcm.com, and check it out. We exist. If you're with me here in our office, we have a wall that says we believe every family should feel confident whether buying or selling a home. And that's why we exist, to be sort of your resource, to have the facts, to have them at command and be able to say, hey, this is what's happening in the market. So love for folks to check it out. Grateful to be on, and thank you for the invite. We'll have to do it again.
Thanks a lot, David. I always appreciate you. Thanks for your time.
You got it.
That was the conversation with David Childers. David gives great information in this podcast, and I think the best takeaway from our conversation is that 2026 should be better than 2025 and 2024. And that gives me hope that we're going to see increased unit sales. We're going to see more inventory. We're going to see more movement in terms of sellers getting out of their homes because interest rates may be a little bit lower. It all seems to be trending in the right direction for the year ahead. So now is the time to be reaching out to your people, getting your ducks in a row for the new year so you can capitalize on the market in 2026 and exceed your goals. notes. Well, that was the podcast for this week. We will be back in another couple of weeks with a new topic, a new guest, and as always, if you want to hear something that we haven't covered yet, please reach out to me, jason.ostrowski@foxroach.com. And if you haven't liked and subscribed to the podcast or left us a review yet, please do so. It helps us to reach more people. Once again, this is Jason Ostrowski saying stay safe out there, stay selling, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Everything Real Estate Podcast.